and welcome to this webinar. Thank you all for tuning in. My name is Grace Crane-Wright, and I am the GIO Science Coordinator and Campaigns Lead. And I'm here to talk to you all today about how you can incorporate climate and carbon data into your IVSS projects. And you might be wondering why I'm here talking to you today and not the IVSS team. And that is because we are teaming up this year in combining our efforts on telling climate stories across several events that we are putting on from Globe. And one of those events is the YCC campaign, which is the Year of Climate and Carbon, a Globe Action and Awareness campaign. And this ties very well into this year's IVSS, which is Climate Investigations and Understanding Earth as a System. And we are joining efforts here because climate is so important and we want to hear your climate stories. And so today, what I'm going to be discussing is how you can tell your climate stories with your IVSS projects using Globe protocol bundles, which are ways that protocols can connect. And they're really great ways to look at climate and carbon together. And I just want to point out, anytime over the next year you see this symbol here, which you can spot it here in the International Virtual Science Symposium banner for 2024, that means that that event or that webinar is part of the YCC campaign and part of these overall climate investigations. So what's really exciting about this year's IVSS is that, yes, we're having that connection with YCC, and there's all these opportunities to get these multiple badges. Like, I am a data scientist, I am a STEM storyteller, I'm a STEM professional, I'm a collaborator, I make an impact, I am a problem solver, and I am an engineer. But what also is exciting about this year is that with YCC and connecting your project to climate and carbon, you'll also receive a special badge that signifies the Year of Climate and Carbon, the Globe Action and Awareness campaign. So I just wanted to give you all a little bit of context before we dive in as to why I'm here talking with you all today and how this year-long event ties into IVSS. So I'm going to jump in and really talk about what are Globe protocols. Some of you know about these particular packages, that you've used them in your IVSS projects in the past, but some of you here today might be very new to Globe Protocol Bundles. So Globe Protocol Bundles span across all 4 spheres and really allow everyone to look at the Earth as a system. So Globe Protocol Bundles bring together protocols from each of the 4 spheres: atmosphere, biosphere, pedosphere, and hydrosphere, and allow you to look at a specific question in a specific area. For example, protocol bundles ask questions and allow you to research about the agriculture, about air quality, about ENSO, which is coming this year, which is the El Nino Southern Oscillation event. We have mosquitoes. To bring protocols together to think about mosquitoes, the ocean, rivers and lakes, soils, the urban environment, the water cycle, water quality, and lastly, weather. And so these protocol bundles bring together different protocols, and I'm going to go through each of these to show which of the protocols are pulled together for each one of these bundles and how you might be able to use them in your IVSS research, specifically in connecting to understanding your local climate and also pulling in some carbon data if you're interested. So to start us off, we have air quality. So air quality bundle looks at really this atmosphere and the biosphere and really takes a lot of protocols from the atmosphere to understand how air is changing over time. But it also is looking at how the air is affected by land cover and what is growing around that particular site that you are measuring. So air quality is a great way to look at not only how the air is changing over time, but how the biosphere and how vegetation is affecting it. Next one is agriculture. Agriculture takes in all of the different spheres, from atmosphere, pedosphere, hydrosphere, and biosphere. Because agriculture, the dependency that agriculture has on the local environment is extreme. Agriculture, how plants grow, how they're being cultivated, is affected by the air temperature, the precipitation, affected by the soil quality, soil moisture, how fertile is the soil, affected by other vegetation in the area, the seasons, so green up and green down, also affected by land cover. And then, of course, agriculture is affected by, and you can understand agriculture through the hydrosphere. So looking at what water sources are used to water the plants and vegetation that you're looking at. What is the salinity? What are the nutrients? What's the pH? So in agriculture, you're able to ask these types of questions and really understand how agriculture might be affected by the local environment. The next bundle here is the El Niño Southern Oscillation event, which again looks at 3 of the bundles. This allows you to look more at pedosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere. And this particular bundle pulls in information about precipitation, SMAP soil moisture and soil temperature, so pulling in that satellite data, encouraging you all to look at how NASA scientists and other scientists are also experimenting and looking at the El Niño Southern Oscillation events. And then, of course, if you're living in these areas, taking your water temperature, taking these different air temperatures and really trying to understand what does this event have an effect on your local scale, and being able to compare that at a global scale as well. And then, of course, we have the mosquito bundle, which pulls, again, every single sphere across globe. Again, looking at that air temperature, looking at the water temperature and dissolved oxygen and hydrosphere, understanding, again, the seasons and the land cover. What kind of vegetation are near these sampling sites where you might be noticing different mosquito populations? And then, of course, also looking at the soil. How does the soil play a role in these mosquito populations? And really tying in all of these measurements together to tell a story about mosquitoes in your area, or why maybe there's more in one body of water or more in one location compared to another. The ocean. Again, the ocean bundle pulls together protocols from every single sphere. Again, allowing you to get a full view of understanding this complex ecosystem. So if you live near an ocean, you have the opportunity to really understand at a local context what is happening with your ocean, what is happening on your shores, and how might that compare to other members in the globe community that also live on an ocean or live on a sea. What are those differences? And you can look at by comparing air temperature, water transparency, soil pH, and land cover. Again, looking at those vegetation around the ocean. I haven't mentioned this in the other bundles, but anytime there's a biosphere component to one of these bundles, there's an opportunity to look at carbon biomass in that vegetation. And that allows you to start really understanding how much carbon are in these trees and these shrubs and these bushes, and how does that compare to the local atmosphere and environment. Those types of questions you can also find and look for in your local databases from your local researchers or local weather stations. Another way to look at water is fresh water, which are rivers and lakes. And again, these are really focused on what is the interaction with these vegetation in rivers and lakes? How does the soil is not directly on this bundle, but potentially what is the water transparency? How is the salinity affected? And this could potentially have been caused from erosion, from soil leaching into the rivers and lakes, maybe because of the certain types of vegetation that are growing along its shores. How are rivers and lakes influenced by precipitation changes? How are they influenced by air temperature changes? So again, this bundle allows you to look at your local rivers and lakes to understand them on a local context, but allow you to look at other rivers and lakes around the world and ask these really important climate questions. And now the soils bundle also allows you to look at all 4 of the spheres to really understand how soils play such an important role in our global ecosystem and on our local ecosystem. Soils are what brings us food, gives us stabilization in our ground. Soils allow us to understand more of the complexities of changing over time. And so some, if not all, of these protocols here in the soil bundle allow you to explore soils in a more in-depth way. And of course, then allow you to grab that information and share it with others. Again, taking a soil pH measurement and a water pH measurement and understanding the vegetation in the area, and then looking at how precipitation has changed over time. That all can play a really big role in telling a soil story. Urban. So if you live in an urban environment, or you living in a city, or even if you're living in a rural area, you can still work on this bundle. Because what this bundle is showing is that there's so much to learn in these different cities and towns and different ecosystems that we all live in. So part of this urban bundle also looks at all these 4 spheres, allowing you to take protocols from each sphere to tell a story about your urban environment. So if I'm living in a city, I want to understand how the city atmosphere is maybe changing, or maybe what's the difference between having no trees on my street versus having trees on my street. How does that change? How does that affect the surface temperature? How does that affect maybe the water temperature and water bodies nearby? What kind of vegetation are around, and maybe what does the soil temperature look like? So again, these bundles allow us to answer these more complex questions by using the GLOBE protocols in a simplified way. And I just want it to be clear that just because all these protocols are here listed doesn't mean you have to do every single protocol to understand your urban environment. Picking one from each sphere allows you to already start telling a story on a local scale that you can compare at a global scale. The water cycle. Again, this is a bundle that allows you to look at changes in the local water cycle, allow you to look at watersheds in your area, but also allow you to look at how is the water cycle maybe changing on a regional level. Are there big changes happening? Really, how is precipitation playing a role, and how is soil moisture changing over time? And water quality, another bundle that allows you to really understand how the local water sources have changed over time. And this is a bundle that, for example, can be combined with several of the other bundles. Water quality bundle can be compared with mosquitoes, urban, rivers and lakes, and oceans, because all of those depend on water quality and understanding how the water is being either affected, or it changes over time, or is different amongst those different bodies of water. And lastly, the last bundle is the weather bundle. And so the weather bundle, again, allows you to look at your local weather. That then allows us to understand local and regional climatic changes over time, and allow you to compare that on a global scale. So again, just taking measurements amongst multiple spheres allows you to answer these climate questions and tell your climate story from your perspective, and really start to share on a local scale and a global scale. So what might be some of the questions that you might ask to look at climate and carbon while using the protocol bundles, or another combination of the protocols in general, to help guide your IVSS project and looking at your local climate and investigating your local climate? So maybe you ask a question about, how do trees and other vegetation types relate to the oceans or other water bodies? How do vegetation types change between an ocean, a river, and a lake? How do different tree species affect the quality of the air? What about other vegetation types? Does the air quality change when you're looking at a site surrounded by trees versus a site surrounded by buildings? How do plant growth patterns and carbon biomass change over time or across a region or a country? So how do those seasons play a role? And are seasons changing right now? Is green up and green down happening earlier or later? And potentially, how does that affect the carbon biomass in the trees or in the grasses? How do changes in weather patterns potentially affect mosquito populations and the water quality? So again, how do local weather changes, how are they affecting these populations of mosquitoes? Is it increasing them, decreasing them? And what about the water quality of the water bodies where these mosquito populations are thriving? And what about how does surface and air temperature differ between a city with more concrete versus a city with more green space? Is there a difference in the carbon biomass of the vegetation growing in these two different locations? So this is a way, again, to look at if you're living in an urban environment or a small town, how does the surface and air temperature change when you're on a city street versus at a city park? What are you experiencing? What are you seeing and what are you seeing and observing in these changes? And if you can go the next step, looking at the carbon biomass of that vegetation growing in that area. On that street with more concrete, are there trees? Are you able to take a sample? In that city park, are there also trees growing or grasses growing that you could take a sample and really start to understand that carbon biomass? And again, how does surrounding vegetation affect different water bodies? Similar to that first question I posed, where does vegetation come into play with water? How does that affect lakes and rivers and the oceans? And vice versa, how do the oceans, rivers, and lakes potentially affect the different vegetation that live nearby and grow nearby? And lastly, but not least, and these are just ideas of questions, is how does air and soil temperature change based on vegetation type in a sampling location? So again, this is looking at how do just things change based on the small environmental changes, so the small situational changes that you may find yourself in, measuring the local temperature and air temperature at your house compared to your friend's house or compared to your school versus another school. And this is a really great way to collaborate and look at these different measurements across multiple countries and regions, and even within your own city, just looking at how things change even on a very in a micro way. So there are so many ways that you can investigate the climate on a local scale to better understand the Earth as a system. As we mentioned, there's all these different protocol bundles, but then there's also just so many globe protocols that you can combine and really allow you to ask whatever question, because whatever question you ask using whatever protocol or bundle, you will be benefiting the environment through your investigation and your curiosity. So I really encourage and implore you to go out and tell your climate story for the entire worldwide community. Using one of these bundles or being inspired by one of these bundles to really start to learn about your local environment that can be compared to the global environment. And so with that, more information about the 2024 IVSS, the Year of Climate and Carbon campaign, Globe Protocol bundles, and more can be found on the globe.gov website. And also for specific questions, you can reach out to the Globe IVSS at ucar.edu email, where they will answer your questions about submitting your project, getting ideas for your project, etc. So I want to thank you all for joining and listening with me today. We really are excited. We, GIO, and the Globe community are excited to hear about your climate stories and your carbon stories and really see how you're benefiting your local and global environment.